time for everybody here to kind of revision, rethink really the type of high school and the type of educational facilities that this community can have. So I'm really excited to share with you some of the trends, some of the things that are happening in sports and recreation. We're seeing technology really driving this kind of the trends across all levels. And what I mean by all levels, I mean everything from professional to collegiate to high school, all the way down. And these are 5 of the trends. If you notice, diversity, wearable technology, you know, the Fitbit, the Apple Watch, virtual reality, esports. I think everybody knows about their kids and getting involved in esports. Hybrid facilities. Jeff Zinda is going to talk a little bit about that later, about the convergence of different building types. I'll talk about that too. How different building types, maybe from sports facilities, come together and create a new hybrid. And smart environments. You hear smart stadiums or smart arenas today, kind of environments. But what I'd like to talk about, what I'd really like to focus on in this discussion is diversity. And diversity comes in a lot of different avenues, but it's certainly something that we're seeing in the world around us. And it's also something that we're seeing in all of our schools. And it happens of diversification in students. It happens in the sports and activities they play. It also happens in the type of spaces that we start to think of and start to design when we're thinking of this building and really thinking innovatively about how we approach it differently. I don't think it's any news that being active produces a better life, a better outcome for all of us, from kids all the way up through adults. It's essential that we stay active and have healthy lives. One thing we are seeing with the diversification since 1991 is the gap between females and males changing. And actually, it's declined. More girls are becoming involved in sports, and it's having a real impact. Actually, in the 10th grade, this chart here shows the 10th grade is actually the gap's closed the narrowest between boys and girls. But also racially and ethnically, we're seeing more of a diversification. When you look at the projection out to 2023, it becomes a pretty diverse group amongst high school students around the US. So what does that mean to the sports and activities they play? I think we have to start thinking a little bit beyond the traditional sports. I think those will always exist, and we need to accommodate kids that want to play that. But we also have to think a little bit outside of the box and start to think about the different sports and the activities and providing those at a high school level and environments that will inspire those type of spaces. Ultimate Frisbee, sled hockey. Sled hockey's huge in the Midwest, and I can imagine that becoming big in the Northeast. It started out from a disability standpoint. How can you get disabled kids and youth to play hockey? It's a sport that everybody loves. Also, wounded veterans are playing this all over the world. These are the type of diverse sports that I think we start to think about and want to incorporate. Quidditch, yes, that's a broom. This is a sport, I think it's a sport, inspired by Harry Potter, of course. So there's lots of different types of sports out there. And I think what Perkins and Will's approach is, and what we bring to the table when we start to think about this, is that all of these sports for everybody have to be inclusive. So as we're brainstorming about the type of spaces and the type of places that we want to have these activities in, we want to make sure that they're inclusive for everybody. We want to make sure, I believe everybody shares in this, that these aren't spaces that are intimidating. You know, this is a gym. It's kind of funny that we're actually having this here for the sports guy to talk about a gym, but a very different kind of a world today when you think of a gym. It's not one door and the door shuts and people do an activity and nobody knows what they're doing behind that door. I think the opportunity really is to have this kind of transparent, connected, like Bill talked about, connected space that are flexible. Every space is a learning opportunity. This is an actual community center, a recreation center that has basketball facilities, hockey facilities, swimming facilities. They're all interconnected. Everybody gets to see what each other is doing and learn from that and to be exposed to it. If they're doing a cool activity, I can actually see it and I can understand or at least appreciate what's going on with some of my peers. A project that we're doing right now at Phillips Andover Academy is it's kind of a hybrid building. It's a multi-purpose squash venue, indoor track, basketball, volleyball, tennis, multi-purpose courts. And when we went out to design this building in very similar kind of environment, visioning what that building would be, one of the main drivers was that it would be a place for all, that it wouldn't be a place that just the jocks went and everybody else felt intimidated about, but it wanted to be representative of any and every sport that could actually take place there. And this happens to be the main spine through the space that looks into all the different activities. So from that central spine, you can kind of look in and see what everybody's doing in the school. But that kind of inclusion and diversity boiled down all the way down to the graphics that we designed. And this is actually a section kind of the main entry where we spent tons of time looking at what those graphics should be. Should they be real people? Should they be sports that are in there? Should they be sports that are outside? And at the end of the day, they wanted to make these characters representative of everything that could happen there, but also all of the kind of dynamic blocks of color became icons of everything that you could do in this space that weren't varsity sports. They were dance and stretching and Quidditch and all these different activities. This is the actual section through the building, and it shows how the graphics kind of worked up through the building. That was one level of kind of information and how to make that building inclusive. Another one was that building has no gender-dedicated locker rooms, bathrooms. It's a completely open space that they can operate as they see fit for the teams and people that are playing there at a given time. So that's another key piece as we start to think about the school and start to think about athletics and locker room spaces. They're very expensive spaces. How do we design them so they're inclusive and open to everybody? I think this is a really neat story, and I think it's something that we can take with us into the design of the Belmont School. This is actually an interior rendering of that space. Another type of kind of transparency or connectivity are spaces that used to be back of the house, which were sports medicine, kinesiology, training, nutritional spaces, are now coming to the front of the house. This is part of that hybridization where they become showcase projects. These are real educational spaces. This happens to be a sports medicine clinic at UMass, but these are happening in our high school cities around the country. And these become showcase spaces that people get to see and understand what's going on from a healthcare standpoint, a nutritional standpoint, a human performance standpoint. Those spaces look directly out into other activity spaces, so there isn't a separation between the athlete and the recreation. This is what a recreation a gym would look like today, this space. Open, inviting, connected to the outside, letting natural light in, being able to see your friends and also see others from outside. Hockey facilities that have transparency and connectivity into other spaces adjoining them, that these spaces don't become dark boxes that nobody knows what's going on, but they're actually inviting and open spaces. Flexibility is also a key component when we start to think about these spaces. This happens to be a multi-purpose space that directly opens out into an adjoining green area that can be tied into this space, but just through picking the right flooring type, picking the right acoustics, the right lighting, the right size of the space can start to allow that space to be flexible for all kinds of activities, whether they're recreation, sports, nutritional, educational. And I think that's really the opportunity we have at hand, is to kind of think outside of the box, think in the ways that many people described here today, to create a diverse, inclusive building that can really inspire activity for the future.